How about that?
Oh,
We've got camp coming up next week here in Jacksonville, and it should be a lot of fun. All right, you have that depth chart right in front of you, I think. The roster might be sitting on my seat.
I do.
I don't know which seat you're in.
I have
But
found it.
list the cornerbacks that are on this roster. You usually go to camp with a bunch of corners. So they're plentiful in name.
Right.
But let's take a look at the camp battles we're about to see coming up in the next couple of weeks when it comes to the corner position.
We'll say I'll just go by name for starters rather than presumptive depth chart. Obviously we've got C.J. Henderson, Sidney Jones got some significant playing time last year. Incoming presumptive number one, Shaq Griffin, Chris Claybrooks, also the two incoming guys from the University of Georgia, DJ Daniel and Tyson Campbell, Jamison Houston, Luke Barku, Trey Herndon, and Corey Straughter, rounding out the list.
Okay, this might have to do some who are these guys in camp, right? A little bit. Well, so here's the deal,
Yep.
right? The attention has been around Shaq Griffin,
Right.
who obviously is a starter on the outside because of the money they paid him, and hopefully he delivers. That will be a big thing for the Jacksonville Jaguars in their secondary if he lives up to the paycheck.
Right.
Then the fascination here is C.J. Henderson, who, by the way, just went on the COVID-19 list today. Just came out in the last 15 minutes. We told you about it. And Tyson Campbell, the 33rd overall pick out of Georgia, which raised some questions. I was like, what are they doing? Is this a depth play? Can he play nickel? Are there concerns about C.J. Henderson? And while Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke in front of the microphone countless times right around draft time said, no, man, we love CJ. CJ's doing well. Gave good progress reports on CJ. You can never have enough depth. We think you can do a lot of different things. They think Tyson Campbell, I think, can play that nickel spot and others. I don't know if all of us are convinced that everybody's all in on CJ Henderson, but we have to go with what they told us, and it seems like they're going to try to find a way to play all these three guys together. Henderson, Tyson Campbell, and Shaq Griffin. Is that the way you see it?
No, actually. I think that they picked up Tyson Campbell, to be honestly, as maybe a borderline insurance policy, but also because I don't think they are sure about C.J. Henderson. I mean, I know that's what they've told us and everything, but I mean, look, there's been questions about C.J. Henderson basically, since he went down with his injury. Obviously, I don't know. I think they are going to try to find ways to play all of these guys, but if you ask me truthfully, I think we're looking at by a week. If they all stay healthy, I think Tyson Campbell probably gets more defensive snaps than C.J. Henderson by the time we get to week 8.
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting league in the passing game. We know this. It's like 65% of the time where you're going to have three corners on the field most likely anyway.
Sure.
So, but some of the people, people have said, hey, Tyson Campbell can move all over, but they'll said, hey, his strength's really on the outside. So you got to be really careful with rookies, I believe, especially young players, to put them in positions that they're not going to be at their best. We've seen it before. Taven Bryan didn't work out. We saw it, I think, with Miles Jack a little bit. Didn't work out. Put them in the best position to be successful. Can Tyson Campbell play inside? Probably, yeah. I think he can. I mean, he's probably a very talented player, and you'll probably be okay. Is that where he's his best? That's what you have to ask a little bit. So that will raise some questions, and what they do in camp and how C.J. Henderson plays and how Campbell plays, how quickly he comes along, will dictate exactly what they decide to do. Trey Herndon is a fascinating guy. He played a bunch last year at the other corner spot. This is a guy over the years, Marcel, that I heard could slide into that nickel spot and be okay. I think the old regime thought that he could do that if needed. I wonder if this regime thinks that and where his skill set is. I think it was Shaq Griffin coming out of OTAs and mandatory minicamp who was really raving about Trey Herndon. This is a smart guy out of Vanderbilt, quiet. He's now become a veteran player. He's played significant amount of snaps. And I think it was Shaq who was asked, like, if there's one guy that's really turned heads, who is it? And that was Trey Herndon. I got to believe this regime likes Trey Herndon.
I think so. I would agree with that. And truthfully, I like Trey Herndon too. I mean, obviously, I know there were definitely some times when he was caught in some unfavorable positions and situations last year, but I think the hope in the initial plan right now is for him to be that starting nickel corner going into the season and hoping that he thrives there. I think he is a guy that can kind of move around. Obviously, he got the experience on the outside. I think moving inside, the only I guess you can call it question I have is, sometimes that nickel guy gets caught covering these, these big movable tight ends. And with Trey Herndon being, a shorter 5'11", 175, 80-pound guy, I just wonder, how he's going to manage and fare there. But I think overall, I think he's looked good in practice, obviously. Like you said, Shaq Griffin talks about him. A lot of the coaching staff. Tim Walton talks about him, Jaguars defensive backs coach. I think he's a guy that they would like to solidify and really take that nickel spot, and I think they're going to give him every opportunity to do so, to be honest with you.
So here's what else you have. Of course, we just talked about Herndon. We talked about Tyson Campbell. We talked about C.J. Henderson. And, of course, we talked about Shaq Griffin. Mm-hmm. But then you have Luke Barku, who also went on the COVID-19 list today. Right. This guy was a sensation in camp last year, if you remember.
Yep.
This is a guy in college, I believe, that got his hands on a lot of footballs and picked them off.
Mm-hmm.
And he was making some plays last year, too. And then I think he got a bit of a cup of coffee last year during the season, and it was less than impressive.
Right.
So Barku's a guy, can he take a step? Can he grow? Or is he just a guy that we got excited about for a minute? I think that's a fair question when it comes to him. Chris Claybrooks was a 7th-round pick last year for the Jaguars, played a little bit, and actually at times, man, I think he acquitted himself pretty nicely.
He flashed.
Yeah, he did flash a little bit. I don't know what the confidence level of putting him out there on every play is. If someone were to go down, I think that you would think there would be a significant drop-off. But Claybrooks, I believe, will make this roster and be a part of the rotation given what he did a little bit last year. Here's another guy who really flashed last year and people started to like, and that was Sidney Jones.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Sidney Jones definitely earned him a spot in the rotation last year, and people were almost like, hey, bring that guy back. We want more of that guy, And so Sidney Jones is on this roster. He has to impress this set of coaches.
Right.
But if he can pick up where he left off last year, Sidney Jones has a real chance to be part of the depth of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think you almost have to pencil him in fact, in one of the spots from a depth play.
Yeah, 100%. I think Sidney Jones did a lot to help himself going forward last year. Truthfully, if you ask me, I would say he's a lock for the roster. Honestly, I think he's probably the first DB off the bench of your second wave. I think he'll see a lot of snaps. Again, like you said, this is a new regime, so basically for all these guys on the team, yeah, they have tape, but this particular coaching staff hasn't seen them in person, obviously in game situations, so still a lot to prove in training camp and such. But I think that if Sidney Jones can continue what he did last year, obviously he's got some experience. He's been in the league for, a little bit. I think he can definitely be a guy who can make a difference on this team in the cornerback room.
Yeah, his veteran presence there. So you got Jones, you got Shaquille Griffin, you got C.J. Henderson, you got Tyson Campbell, and you got Trey Herndon. That's 5 guys. Yeah. Probably looking at maybe Luke Barku, DJ Daniel, Corey Straughter. Mm-hmm. Those guys are on the roster of probably fighting for one spot.
Yep.
And who will get that? Claybrooks, by the way, too. Sorry. So he's in there. So maybe fighting for one spot. Special teams will come into play. So that's really the nature. I like their depth. I have question marks about C.J. Henderson. I've never seen Tyson Campbell take a snap. There's plenty of things to get excited about. I like Shaquille Griffin. I like him being the anchor back there in the corner room. But I really like their depth. I really do. I like Claybrooks and Barku and Jones and who am I missing? I guess that'd be it. Oh, Herndon. Sorry. And Herndon. I like the fact that these guys have played some games. I think there's some upside to these guys. If there's a position of depth, I think the offensive line has a little bit of that. I think the receivers that we talked about yesterday has a little bit of that. But I think the corners probably fit in that conversation where I don't know if it's just because I know the names or it's because I like their games, but I feel okay about some of the depth that the Jaguars have at the corner spot.
I think it's probably a little bit of both, a little bit of name recognition, and there's obviously some turnover every year, but we've got some guys that we've seen obviously make plays that, and I think probably surprised a little bit. Like I think we, going into the season, obviously seeing these guys play, like nobody thought Sidney Jones was going to give us what he was going to give us. No one thought that Luke Barku was going to, go from being a camp star to kind of a downtrend during the regular season. But a lot of these guys that we've seen come out here and put boots on the ground, I think that helps out a little bit. And I think that ultimately it's like you said, it's a passing league. So you can never really have enough corners, and obviously it's unfortunate, but some of these guys are going to get hurt. So having these amount of people or players that are available, I definitely think will help. As far as the excitement level, I mean, it's still tough because you still got to see it. Obviously, everything's different. Overall different scheme, different coaching staff. The entirety of this team is kind of different. But in terms of guys, we have a nice balance of young guys and veterans, which is definitely something different than we've seen in some of these other rooms, like the receiver room being young prior to obviously Marvin Jones getting here.
Brent Marcel Robinson. The one last thought here on the corners. I think C.J. Henderson is a big player, not only in the secondary for this year, but a big player in the turnaround of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like K'Lavon Chaisson kind of fits this as well, especially since they struggled a bit at times last year in year one, their rookie seasons. But keep in mind, the Jaguars had multiple picks in the first round this year and last year. ETN and Trevor. We like that. We especially think Trevor's going to work out. I think there are so many positive things about ETN now that they made the pick the way they did. I'm not sure many people would have thought they would go that way, but now that they did, there's plenty to get excited about and also see what they could do. C.J. Henderson and K'Lavon Chaisson, they have to deliver. If this organization's going to turn around, you can't waste 2 more first-round picks, not when you had 2 in the top 20. Like, those guys are so critical. And maybe they're not, like, Hall of Fame guys. That's not what I'm saying. They have to be part of this team. They have to be contributors. They have to produce. They cannot be busts. Or this is a slower turnaround than they're going to want it to be. Because it really started last year. The roster building of what we have now in Jacksonville started last year, even though it was a different regime. And, yeah, it's easy to say, well, it was on Caldwell, it was on whoever. Well, you can say that all you want. But the bottom line is that doesn't help you get better faster. You are rooting for those picks to do well if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, because it's vital that you didn't swing and miss again on first-round picks. So I think those guys are super critical. Again, I'm not saying they have to make it to the Pro Bowl this year, but they have to produce. They have to be reliable, and they have to show flashes of growth off that rookie season, which in many respects was disappointing outside of a couple of games, really, for C.J. Henderson especially, and it was disappointing for K'Lavon Chaisson, rated one of the worst pass rushers in all of football a season ago.